The isolated town of Kaho, nestled deep within the rainforest valley of a fictional Hawaiian island, has always been off the map. Tourism never caught on. Residents never left. And the outside world never looked in too closely. That's how the invaders got in. The Uluhi effect, a localized spatial and perceptual distortion field where biological processes, including memory, growth, and environmental behavior, adjust to accommodate an unperceived presence, producing a corrected version of reality over time. It started on a Wednesday. Kailani Mahalana stepped onto the porch and paused, blinking at the line of rain falling up. Not drizzle, not fog, actual droplets, threading skyward like reversed teardrops. At first, she thought it was an optical illusion, the kind that tricks the eyes if you look through mosquito screens the wrong way. But when she reached out her hand, her palm stayed dry, and the rain still climbed past her fingers. She pulled out her phone. No signal. Again. The school bus rumbled down the hill, slow like it always was on wet roads, and she waved without thinking. But her mind was elsewhere, on the garden out front. The taro she'd planted 3 weeks ago had bloomed sideways, pushing their broad green leaves toward the fence, not the sun. 2 of the fronds were even coiled, like they were reaching for something unseen. That's when she noticed the dog. It stood in the street like a statue, mangy, too thin, and eerily motionless. No tail twitch, no ear flick, no shift of breath in its sides. Kailani stepped toward it cautiously, the way you do when a wild thing looks too still. "Hey, you okay?" she called. No blink. She reached for her keys. Metal jangled. The dog's head turned, but not toward her. It turned up, straight into the rain that was still flowing backward. Then it took a step, 1 step, and vanished. Gone. Like stepping off the stage between acts. No sound, no light, no disturbance. The street behind it was still damp. Kailani didn't mention the dog at school. Not at first. Her 8th graders were busy sketching weather maps and grumbling about the faulty school aircon again. She was halfway through explaining barometric pressure when Keola, a boy who never paid attention, raised his hand. "Miss," he said, "is it still raining in the other Kaho?" The class laughed. Kailani didn't. "What do you mean?" she asked carefully. "The other one," he said, doodling lazily on the edge of his notebook. "The one we go to when we sleep." He flipped the page and showed her a drawing. It was a detailed sketch of Kaho town, the post office, the fish market, the gas station, but the sky was filled with black cubes, floating like silent birds. Her stomach turned. Another student, Alamia, raised her hand. "I dreamed that one too," she whispered. "Except we lived in the house with the tree made of bones." 3 more students nodded. Kailani asked them to describe the dreams. They did, in eerie agreement. The same weather. The same eerie market. The same stranger with no face waving from behind the school fence. None of them seemed alarmed. She sent them to lunch early, locked the door, and paced the room with her breath tight in her chest. She pulled out her old meteorology textbook. Nothing about reverse rainfall. Nothing about collective dreaming. She Googled mass hallucination Kaho. No hits. She Googled Kaho invasion. The screen went blank for 5 seconds, then loaded ads for surfboards. That night, she visited her mother. The Mahalana matriarch, Mele, was grinding our root into a clay bowl, humming the same funeral chant she always did when something was wrong. Kailani stepped into the hail without greeting. "Did you see the rain?" "I saw rain, yes," Mele said without looking up. "It was going upward. Maybe you were upside down." "Mama." Mele stopped. Her hands stilled. She met Kailani's eyes. "I've lived here all my life," she said quietly. "And there's always something not quite right in Kaho. But you know what we do." Kailani didn't answer. "We stay still," Mele said. "And we don't give it a name. That's how you survive it." Kailani didn't sleep that night. She tried, but something under her house groaned. A long, low exhale. Not a pipe, not the wind. When she peeked out her window, she saw her own backyard shift, like the lawn was adjusting itself to a shape beneath it. And then came the scream. Not human. Not close. But from inside her house. She grabbed the baseball bat by her nightstand and rushed downstairs. The living room lights flickered as she reached the last step. The windows glowed faintly green. And then she saw it. A smooth, obsidian-colored crease running along the ceiling. Not a crack. A fold in the air. And from it something leaked, like gravity gone soft. Light bent strangely. Objects shifted as though viewed through water. The space smelled like ripe iron and sugarcane. The Uluhi effect. The fold was part of a localized phenomenon, a conceptual distortion field. Anything in proximity, language, time, muscle memory, began to comply with the dominant architecture, adjusting its nature to match a foreign baseline. The fold didn't infect, it aligned. Her bat slipped from her fingers. The air in the room changed. Warmer. A tickle of static under her tongue. Her front door, without being touched, slowly opened. Outside, the rain still flowed upward. But across the lawn now stood 3 figures in perfect symmetry. Each of them wore her face. The interval skin, a membrane-like phenomenon stretched across time and memory, selectively replacing moments, objects, or people with versioned iterations that maintain local continuity, until something breaks pattern. Hoku Polly didn't believe in ghosts, gods, or government truths. But he did believe in his gear. His backpack rattled with cables, lithium packs, and 2 full-band radio transceivers. The upper relay node on the ridge had been failing all week, odd signal skips, bursts of static that translated into nothing. But last night was different. He'd heard his own voice on the dead band, saying a word he'd never spoken, a word he didn't understand. Olanaku. The morning hike up to the crater ridge was brutal. Dew-slick stone, brittle wind, and the unsettling sense of being watched by something with no body. He reached the summit just before noon. The relay tower looked intact, but every light on the control module was blinking in sync, like a metronome. That wasn't possible. Each module was on a different circuit. He pulled out his drone, calibrated the launch sequence, and sent it up. He needed aerial confirmation, some outside proof that his system wasn't the problem. The drone rose clean and silent. 300 feet. 4. 5. Then it stopped. Mid-air. No crash. No warning. Just a hover. The controller vibrated once and froze. He flipped to camera feed. And that's when it happened. Coco Crater blinked. The entire mountain range beneath him compressed, like eyelids squeezing shut. The valley floor below shifted as if taking a breath. A wave of pressure rippled through the trees, and Hoku's ears popped. Then, silence. Stillness. No wind. The drone fell from the sky. He ran. By the time Hoku reached home, dusk was falling, and his shirt stuck to his skin. His wife, Nanea, looked up from dinner and frowned. "Where's your drone?" "Crashed. Mountains acting weird. Wind shear." "No. It moved. I saw it." She stared at him, then shook her head. "You've been skipping sleep again." He pulled out the SD card, slotted it into the TV. "Just watch." The video loaded. 3 seconds. The drone lifted. Panned left. Static. 3 seconds. Repeat. "What is this?" she asked. "I recorded 10 minutes," he whispered. The file looped itself. That night, after Nanea went to bed, Hoku combed through his archives. Old footage, weather logs, selfies. He was searching for something. Some clue that the crater had always been this way. That's when he found the wedding photo. It was one he didn't remember printing. Or posing for. In the picture, he stood next to Nanea on a black sand beach. Her smile was wide and natural. His wasn't. His mouth was a straight line. His eyes didn't match. One was a shade too dark. And he was wearing a watch. He never wore watches. He flipped the frame over. Scribbled in neat marker was, July 13th, alternate. S1_Poly. His chest went cold. He drove. Midnight roads. Back up to the crater. He had to know if the place was still wrong. If he was. He parked at the bottom and climbed fast, flashlight bouncing wildly with every step. He reached the relay tower and froze. It was gone. Not destroyed. Missing. As though it had never been installed. A sound behind him. Gravel shifting. He turned and saw himself. Same backpack. Same clothes. Same breathing pattern. But the other Hoku's eyes were both brown. And he was holding the drone. The interval skin. The interval skin overlays memory and time with a flexible filter. It doesn't erase, it interpolates, duplicates, versions. Where physical terrain is stable, the skin selectively duplicates people or moments to maintain symmetry when invasion patterns are disrupted. Failures in local logic, like a man seeing himself, cause anchor breaches. One version must collapse. The second Hoku spoke. You weren't supposed to come back. I am me, Hoku growled. I was born here. I live here. Who the hell are you? I'm the stable one. The mountain shuddered. A long breath beneath the soil. Reality around them bent in a slow flex. The stars above flickered, not dimmed, but reorganized. Hoku took a step back. His duplicate took a step forward. Their voices overlapped. One of us doesn't belong. The drone in the other Hoku's hand cracked open like a shell. From inside, something slithered out. Not wires. Not metal. A soft membrane, pulsing with faint light, like a small, coiled creature made from radio waves. It opened an eye without a pupil. Hoku turned and ran. He didn't stop until he reached the road. Behind him, the crater exhaled again. And in his hand, he didn't remember grabbing it, was the second Hoku's watch. It was ticking backwards. The Luele fold, a cultural mimicry phenomenon wherein emotional resonance and ritual movement are absorbed by an alien intelligence, replicated with perfect symmetry but without human weight, creating uncanny replicas that adapt social memory without context or soul. For 40 years, Palika Kanoa had trained dancers in the heart of Kaho. She taught with calluses, with sweat, with the iron tone of her pahi voice and the rhythm of her drum-scarred knees. She could tell when a student was lying just by how they stood. She could read a dancer's thoughts by the turn of a wrist. And now something was wrong in her halau. It began with the youngest Haumana, a girl named Nohea. Nohea had always been stiff, precise but nervous. One of those students who knew the words better than the rhythm. Pepe had placed her in the back row where no one would notice. But last week she danced perfectly. Too perfectly. Her feet didn't pound the earth. They kissed it, and the ground yielded, not in impact but in compliance. Her chest didn't rise with breath. Her spine didn't waver. Her gaze never broke. Not once. The other students began to change, too. Their kaholo step beat in unison, like a single intelligence moving across multiple bodies. Even the eldest girl, Lahela, who used to mess up on purpose just to annoy Pepe, was now flawless. Pepe stopped the class. Again, she said. With feeling this time. Not just memory. They repeated the ollie. Their mouths moved in time. The tone was right. The words were right. But there was no breath behind the chant. That night, Pepe visited Nohea's family in the Paya Flats. Her parents answered with calm smiles, polite nods, and peculiarly, no shoes on inside. Not just the child, but all of them. Not Hawaiian custom. Not Kaho custom. A different custom. She asked about Nohea. They said she was thriving. Confident. No health issues. Sleeping well. I remember she used to stutter, Pepe said. The parents blinked in unison. Then smiled wider. Nohea has always been eloquent, her mother said. Pepe looked to the bookshelf. The family photo on the top shelf had changed. Nohea's head was tilted just so, in the same impossible angle she had during the ollie. Her eyes were too balanced. Her smile touched no muscles. Pepe excused herself. Outside, she exhaled a prayer. At the next rehearsal, the entire halau danced as if possessed. Their feet didn't leave indentations. Their sweat never fell. Their lips moved silently when the music stopped, like the dance had kept going inside them. Pepe clapped. Huli. They spun in perfect formation. Too perfect. And for the first time, they looked at her in sync. Not admiration. Not confusion. Recognition. The Luele fold. This phenomenon absorbs rituals of high cultural or emotional resonance. The fold copies gestures, voice, and timing, then inhabits the performance to blend within a social context. The emulated figures behave nearly identically, except for their lack of biological imperfection. Their purpose isn't mimicry alone, it's cultural occupation. What can be danced can be claimed. Later that night, Palika returned to the halau after hours. No lights. No music. But through the open slats of the lanai walls, she saw them. 6 girls. In the dark. Dancing. No music. No chanting. Their feet hovered an inch off the floor. Their eyes glowed faintly gold. Their shadows were not human silhouettes. Each cast a tall, narrow form, too elongated, too fluid. Pepe stepped inside. One of the dancers turned. It was Nohea. Why are you here? Pepe whispered. Nohea's mouth opened, and 4 voices answered, not just hers, layered, harmonic, not from lungs. You left the door open. We moved in. Pepe backed away, reaching for her ipu drum by the altar. She struck it twice, loud, sharp. The sound shook the halau. The girls twitched, their heads tilting toward the vibration like animals to a scent. Nohea stepped forward. That doesn't work anymore. Pepe struck again, not for sound, but for rhythm. She began to chant, her own ollie of protection, old as her grandmother's grandmother. The girls shrieked. Not in pain, in dissonance. Their forms flickered. Their shadows danced faster than their bodies. The space around them blurred. One of the rafters split as if under pressure. Pepe threw salt across the floor. It sparked, not smoke but light bent wrong. The girls began to shudder. One of them collapsed, not to the ground but into a shimmer, her form unraveling like a photograph dipped in bleach. Then silence. The halau was empty. No dancers. No shadows. No heat. Pepe was alone except for the drum cracked in her lap. Outside, the wind had stopped. The sand behind the building had shifted. Where her students once practiced, a shallow basin now lay in the shape of a giant footstep. The hollow substrate, a sentient infrastructure beneath Kaho that mimics human-built systems and gradually replaces them. It does not destroy, it absorbs, replicating tunnels, conduits, and utilities for purposes unknown. Every replica includes design elements humans didn't invent, because they weren't made for us. Ikaika Nahoa never cared for the sun. He preferred things buried, structured, uncomplaining, which is why the call about the collapsed wastewater tunnel made sense. But what he found underground did not. It was supposed to be a routine inspection. Section 8B, near the northern boundary of Kaho, where the old sugarcane field met the newer homes. A pressure failure had been flagged, likely root intrusion, maybe a soil slide. He took the lower hatch, clambered into the old bypass system, flashlight swinging from his tool belt. The concrete corridor narrowed where old infrastructure met the upgraded piping. He stepped into the wet dark, boots sloshing through knee-deep water. His radio crackled once, then died. He frowned and kept moving. Then he found the breach. Except it wasn't a breach. It was an opening. An archway, clean and symmetrical. Too perfect to be carved by collapse. The rebar from the tunnel walls blended into a new material. Black, matte, veined with soft blue luminescence. The inside pulsed faintly, like the whole space was inhaling. And it was warm. He stepped in. The chamber beyond was spherical. 20 feet across, featureless at first glance. But as he moved, shapes on the walls shimmered into existence, not drawn or etched, but willingly visible only when you looked at them from the wrong angle. Geometries bent toward his gaze. Every step shifted the interior. Panels aligned, retracted, reshaped. It felt like walking inside a memory of a building, remembered wrong. He backed up. The wall behind him had sealed. The hollow substrate. An intelligence made of structure. Not creature, not machine, but space itself, or at least something that used architecture like we use speech. It does not attack. It duplicates existing infrastructure, subtly rerouting function through itself. Sewers, basements, cellars. Once accessed, the hollow substrate gradually erases the original purpose and replaces the personnel. Ikaika pounded on the wall. It didn't echo. Instead, a panel peeled open on its own, revealing a ladder, slick with moisture, leading upward. He climbed, 2 rungs at a time. The air grew colder. The hatch above opened. He emerged. Not in the tunnel, but in the maintenance shed beside it. Except the shed was pristine. New. With no hatch. No entrance to the tunnel at all. He looked around. Daylight. Familiar trees. Birds. His truck was still parked. But the clipboard inside had a different work order. A different signature. Not his. He drove straight to the wastewater control office. Security badge. Denied. His name, not in the log. His desk, cleared. His locker, labeled Kamaharo D. A man he didn't know was sitting at his station, wearing his vest. His ID badge. Ikaika stood frozen. "Can I help you?" The man asked. His voice was polite, but his smile matched the perfect curve of the hatch's edge. He ran. Through the back alley. Over the gravel lot. Into the dense tree line behind the parking structure. His lungs burned, but the air stayed cool. Too cool. A hand grabbed him, he spun. It was Kailani, the science teacher. "Ikaika," she said, blinking. "Are you okay?" "You remember me?" "Yeah, why?" He grabbed her shoulder. "I need you to come with me. Now." They returned to the site. The hatch was gone, just as he feared. But the earth still smelled wrong, sweet, metallic, too humid. Kailani knelt near the ground. "This soil's hot." "Yeah," Ikaika said. "There's something under us." And just then, the ground split. No warning. No quake. Just silence, followed by a sharp seam ripping open beneath them. A surge of smooth material burst out, like a coiled steel tongue. It slashed sideways. He shoved Kailani back. They both tumbled down the slope as the tendril coiled where they'd stood. The shed behind them shivered. Its walls flickered, duplicating themselves for a half-second, like 2 frames of reality in dispute. They escaped. But when Ikaika returned alone the next morning, the shed had returned to its decayed state. The forest was overgrown, and there was no sign Kailani had ever come with him. Her voicemail was gone. Her number, unassigned. Her house, listed as vacant. Only the mud on his boots proved she was real. And it was drying fast. The naming hunger. A non-terrestrial intelligence that consumes identity through linguistic anchoring. Names are not simply descriptors, but anchors of existence. To name something under its influence is to override it, to feed it to something else. It targets developing minds, particularly those that still think stories are rules. Lupe Kalama was the kind of child who noticed things adults didn't. That the principal always blinked exactly every 11 seconds. That her teacher's shoes left no footprints on wet tile. That every time her classmate Malia mentioned her dog, the name changed, Pico, then Milo, then Pele, though it was always the same black mutt. And lately, the stars had been missing. It started on a cloudy night when Lupe, sitting alone on the lanai, whispered a word that wasn't a word. Ha'elaku. She said it once, and a star above her house vanished. Not clouded, not faded, just gone. The next day, in art class, Lupe began drawing. Not animals, not people, but constellations that didn't exist. She named them softly as she shaded. The empty tree, a spindly shape with arms reaching but no roots. The 2 fathers, a spiral of figures with the same face, gazing at a child who lacked one. The mouth that smiles when you cry, a row of stars shaped like teeth, bending into a grin that twisted into a frown if stared at too long. Each time she spoke a name, she felt full, like swallowing something sweet and strange. By the end of the week, her classmates had stopped looking up. because whole corners of the sky were gone. Not black. Not covered. Just missing like empty space in a puzzle. One day, a boy named Keone teased her at recess. "Name me next, weird girl," he taunted. "Make me disappear." Lupe tilted her head. "Okay." She smiled gently. Nanae. That night, he was gone. His seat was empty the next day. No one mentioned him. No one noticed. Not even the teacher. Lupe asked where Keone was. The class stared blankly. "You mean the new kid?" the teacher asked. "We don't have a Keone in this school." But Lupe still had his drawing, folded in her backpack. Crayon-smeared stars and an alien she'd helped him color green. She showed it to the teacher. The paper was blank. The naming hunger. It is not a creature. It is a pattern. A parasitic data layer that feeds on the identity force of a named thing. Once a target is named under its influence, that name becomes a key, a summons, and a replacement. It prefers children because they still believe names have power. And under its logic, they do. Lupe became quiet after that. She stopped raising her hand. She watched the night sky and wondered how many more stars it would take. Then, one morning, she found a notebook in her cubby that wasn't hers. Its pages were filled with symbols. Not letters, but names. Not of people. Not of stars. But of places that had never existed, and yet felt familiar. Kaulana Kalani, the city that whispers when you speak its name. Huliel, the mountain that grows taller each time you forget it. Puueana, the sea that remembers the face of your grief. One of the names was circled. Lupe Kalama. And underneath, scribbled in faint red pencil. This one is starting to notice. That night, her room filled with static. Not sound, just pressure in her head, like 1,000 names crowding behind her skull. She crawled under her desk and cried. Not because she was scared, but because she knew if she said another name out loud, she wouldn't come back the same. But it was too late. Outside her window, the sky blinked again. She pressed her palm to the glass. A reflection looked back. Same hair. Same eyes. Same pajamas. But not her. The reflection smiled. And said her name. Once. Clearly. With hunger. The trade loop. A multidimensional barter mechanism that feeds on transactional memory. It creates a looping space where economic rituals are harvested and rewritten. Value is not lost, but redirected. Those who engage become part of the transaction. Makani Iona hated working late. But someone had to close the store. Kaho General had been in his family since the 1950s, its wooden walls so soaked in salt air and pesticide that they could probably sprout a second roof. And lately, things had been going missing. Not shoplifted. Not miscounted. Just unhappening. An entire crate of bottled water, vanished. A pallet of flour, gone, yet marked as delivered. 5 cartons of eggs that no one recalled seeing but showed up in the inventory anyway. He checked the security tapes. Nothing. Just jump cuts. Silent glitches. Time would skip then resume. But the footage always ended at 3:33 a.m., no matter when it began. Then one night he stayed. Late. Lights low. Coffee strong. Camera rolling. Around 2:40 a.m., the freezer lights flickered. A whisper of motion near aisle 3. Makani hid behind the counter and watched the monitor. A figure stepped into frame. Himself. Not wearing the flannel he had on now, but his old gray shirt from last year. He moved calmly, scanning a bar of soap, a can of Spam, a box of Band-Aids. Then came the others. Tall, silent figures. Wrapped in cloth that shimmered like foil and oil. No faces, no feet, just presence. They placed no items on the counter. They said nothing. Makani watched himself nod, then pass them plastic bags filled with things he didn't remember stocking. As the last one left, the clone glanced at the camera. Not just looked, locked eyes. And smiled. Makani slammed the keyboard. Tried to save the footage. The drive smoked. The smell wasn't burnt plastic. It was salt and ash and metal, like the air before a tsunami. The trade loop. an extraspatial construct that uses commerce as a psychic interface. It replicates environments of transactional memory and bends them into repeatable rituals. Any location that believes it is a store becomes one. The loop feeds on agreement. Value exchanged, money, trust, identity, is real but no longer belongs to the original economy. The next morning, the shelves were fully stocked. Makani checked the back room. No deliveries. Even the rare imported stuff, Japanese milk candies, cricket protein bars, an old bottle of Li Hing Mui soda no distributor had carried in 5 years, was perfectly shelved. But nothing had price tags. And still people came. They handed him bills. Coins. Even old family heirlooms, a jade ring, a dried ti leaf lei, a black and white photograph that made his stomach drop. "Isn't this your dad?" he asked the kupuna, handing it to him. She smiled gently. "No, my son. That was yours." He looked down. The photo was gone. In its place, a receipt. One line, typed in red. Debt satisfied. That night, he didn't wait behind the counter. He waited inside the cooler, crowbar in hand. At 2:59 a.m., the front bell chimed. He peered through the slatted vent. His double was back. Calm, clean, polite. The reflective figures waited, a cart filled with unfamiliar items. A box labeled memory, kaimana. A tin can marked salt from the day before he died. A mirror with his own reflection blinking wrong. Makani kicked the cooler door open and charged. The doppelganger didn't flinch. The figures turned in perfect fluidity. He swung. The crowbar passed through the double like smoke. One figure stepped forward. No sound. It held out a shopping bag. Inside was a younger Makani's journal. One he burned after his brother drowned. He stared. The page was open to a passage he didn't remember writing. We agreed to the loop. The store was the offer. We are the receipt. Makani screamed. He threw the crowbar into the aisle, knocked shelves over, pulled at bags and boxes, but every object, every soda can, chip bag and toothbrush, had a piece of him on it. A name. A date. A feeling. He tried to unplug the register. The plug didn't lead anywhere. He tried to break the windows. There was only darkness outside now. The bell chimed again. The figures began filing out. One paused and touched his forehead, not with fingers but with the reflection of a hand. He blinked. It was morning. Makani stood behind the counter. Customers lined up. They smiled. They handed him shells, old photographs, dream fragments. He rang them up, each with a quiet, practiced nod. The camera above him was blinking red. Recording. But when Kailani walked in, he didn't recognize her. And when she said his name, his real one, he smiled like he didn't understand. The refrain grid, a self-replicating dimensional overlay that expands reality through localized recursion. Structures and routines duplicate based on pattern density. Once a subject accepts repetition as real, the grid assigns them a role. Non-compliance causes realignment, or removal. Keahipaki had been running the same mail route in Kaho for 8 years. He knew every cracked step, every barking dog, every auntie who fed him banana lumpia in the humid afternoons. So he noticed when the street changed. At first, it was small. A new mailbox at the corner of Lauhala Street. Shiny, stainless, no name. Then 2 more houses showed up past the old fish market. Identical twins in architecture. Same manicured lawns, same ceramic cats in the windows. No moving trucks. No permits. Just there. He asked the dispatcher. Maybe zoning moved fast, she said, not looking up. The next week, there were 11 new homes. Each freshly painted. Each with a smiling couple who waved at the exact same moment. No children. No noise at night. No variation. He tried to skip them. Turned left on Palena instead of going through the cul-de-sac. But when he turned again to head back to the depot, he passed the same street. Same house. Same couple. Still waving. The refrain grid. A lattice of recursive geometry that spreads through routine. It doesn't invade in a burst, It copies what is already there over and over until the repetition becomes stronger than memory. Subjects within the grid are assigned functions, not lives. It grows by expanding through predictability. Attempts to resist cause the grid to measure the outlier for correction or removal. Keahi slammed the brakes. Hell no. He reversed hard, tires skidding. He took a sharp right straight-off route, cutting through the cane field toward the ridge line. The grass grew strangely symmetric, every blade identical. He hit a mailbox. It didn't dent. He jumped out of the truck and ran. The world behind him clipped, the grass turning into asphalt mid-step. He found the edge of a yard and climbed over a rusted chain-link fence. He landed in a garden. A little boy sat there, watching ants march in a perfect circle. "You're not supposed to go off the route," the boy said without looking up. Keahi panted. "What?" "If you don't blink," the boy said softly, "they can't finish measuring you." "What does that mean?" The boy looked up. "You blinked already." The sky cracked. Not thunder. Not lightning. A second sun appeared above Waipua Ridge. Small. Artificial. Burning with the hue of bleached coral. The lawns all around began to adjust. Grass blades twisted toward the new light. The houses rotated slightly. Not the roofs, the entire houses, creaking as though realigning to a new magnetic center. Keahi ran. Behind him, the grid realigned. Houses multiplied. Mailboxes popped into place one by one, already filled with letters marked Keahi Paki, Route 9B. He tore the mail from one box. Inside was a single page. "Congratulations. You've been promoted to permanent carrier status. Role acknowledged. Identity confirmed." His hands began to glow faintly blue. No heat. Just acknowledgement. He screamed. Threw the letter into the wind. Ran into the woods behind the newest house. But there were no trees. Only more houses. Endless. Row after row of Kaho homes. Each with a mailbox labeled his name. Each front door opening just slightly. Welcoming. Hungry. He turned and sprinted again, legs burning. He reached the ridge. The sun, the second one, pulsed. Keahi fell. Not onto grass. Onto sidewalk. Fresh cement. No cracks. A small voice behind him said, "You're home now." The next morning, Route 9B was run by Keahi Paki. Uniform crisp. Posture perfect. Smile in place. He waved politely to the couples on Lauhala Street. He didn't blink. Because there was nowhere else to go. The Bloom Echo, a parasitic conceptual organism that embeds itself into memory clusters. It produces decoy versions of people, close enough to pass as original, but disconnected from the social web. These replacements exist in parallel until one is forgotten. Then the other becomes real. Kailani Mahalana had been gone for 3 days. Or maybe 33. She wasn't sure anymore. The mountain said nothing. The air had a new shape. She walked into her old classroom and stopped short. Her name gone. The plaque by the door read, Ms. Hoamalu, Physical Sciences. A name she didn't recognize. But the handwriting was hers. The classroom itself looked the same. Same faded poster of the water cycle. Same broken faucet in the corner. But when she stepped inside, 20 pairs of eyes looked up, unfamiliar. Then one voice. "Good morning, Ms. Hoamalu." Kailani flinched. "Who told you that's my name?" Silence. Then, "You did," said a boy near the window. Her old key didn't fit the desk drawer. The chair felt wrong beneath her. Even her handwriting on the board was just slightly off. She stormed out and drove home. Her fiancé, Nico, opened the door and smiled like she was a stranger. "Can I help you?" "Nico, it's me." His eyes narrowed. "You're the one who showed up at the school last week, aren't you? You proposed to me under the monkey pod tree behind your grandmother's house. Don't you remember that?" He hesitated. Just for a second. "I've never proposed to anyone." He shut the door. The Bloom Echo. This phenomenon grows from identity repetition. a type of conceptual mimicry that branches into parallel memory tracks. It waits for enough divergence, then selects the version best integrated into the social narrative. The other is discarded, but not destroyed. That echo continues to exist, increasingly rejected by shared memory, until only artifacts remain. Kailani fled to the forest behind the school. Her mind reeled with fragments. She remembered talking to Ikaika about the tunnels. She remembered the halau, the crooked stars, the crater that blinked. None of it made sense. She reached the old banyan grove, dug where her childhood instinct told her. The dirt was soft, recently disturbed. She found a sealed waterproof case, heavy and cold. Inside, her old journals, her birth certificate, a Polaroid of her and Nico at graduation, and a single typed note. You're not the original, but you're close. Close enough to pass. Close enough to matter. Her breath caught. Underneath that page, handwritten in her looping cursive. When the lei forgets its wearer, it still blooms. A sound. Twigs breaking. She turned. Saw herself. Not in a mirror. In flesh. Same face. Same hair. Same scar on her thumb from the fishhook. But the eyes were too still. You're not supposed to be here, the double said. Calm. Sympathetic. I'm the one they chose. Kailani stepped back. You're the one they planted. The double nodded once. Because you resisted. You left the loop. You made them choose. The woods grew silent. The air trembled. Not with wind but decision. The double lunged. Kailani grabbed a broken shovel from the ground and swung. It passed through the figure like mist, then snapped back into solidity, knocking her to the dirt. They fought. Not with fists, but with presence. When one moved, the other mirrored. When one spoke, the words vibrated off trees like echoes. Kailani broke the pattern. She screamed, not words but sound. The double hesitated. That was not part of the loop. Kailani ran. Back to the school. Burst into the teacher's lounge. Pulled the fire alarm. Students poured out. Adults shouted. The double arrived 5 seconds later. And no one knew who was real. One girl, Lupe, looked at both. She walked up slowly. Quiet. Thoughtful. Then she pointed at the original Kailani. That one, she said. She still forgets things. That means she's real. The other version flickered. A low hum rose across the school, like thousands of voices trying to remember a song they didn't learn. The double stared at Kailani, blank-eyed, and collapsed into petals. White, scentless blossoms. Gone. Kailani stood alone. And the fire alarm was silent. No sound. No crowd. No school. Just forest again. And in her hand, a lei made of the same white blossoms. Falling apart. The accord veil, an ancient non-verbal pact between two consciousnesses. Its enforcement exists not through language or law, but shared pattern recognition. Once the balance tips, once too many within the system notice inconsistencies, the veil buckles. The deal frays. And the things wearing borrowed forms must decide, return to what they were, or become what they copied, imperfectly. Nalei was the only one left old enough to remember the village before the lights reached the cliffs. And the only one who didn't flinch when mirrors blinked. At dawn, she lit a fire at the edge of the community center and ground the last of the red salt into her tea. Her hands trembled, not from age, but from what she refused to forget. The treaty wasn't written, she said aloud to no one. It was felt. They fed on our shapes because we agreed not to ask what they were before. Smoke rose. A child passed by and stared. His shadow had 2 heads today. Ikaika woke with his boots still on. The bed unfamiliar. The sheets smelled of bleach and cedar. The apartment layout was identical to his. But the fridge held only instructional pamphlets, photos of food, labeled acceptable memories. He turned on the faucet. Water poured upward. He punched the wall. It crumbled into paper, not plaster. In the mirror, his face was correct, but his reflection wore a wedding band he'd never earned. His door creaked open behind him. A voice. "You're blending too well." That was never part of the agreement. Lupe hadn't spoken since the sky went silent. But she drew. Pages and pages of creatures too wide for their skin. Houses that bled, and a star that wore a necklace made of people's names. One image she drew on her wall. In red marker, a family of 5 holding hands. 4 were smiling. The 5th was looking out of the drawing, straight at her. When her mother tried to erase it, the red wouldn't come off her hands. Hoku's ham radio screamed before it spoke. Frequencies had twisted since Coco Crater blinked. He couldn't even get traffic updates without hearing his own voice played back 3 seconds delayed, saying words he never meant. They wear intention like we wear jackets. Do not believe the trees. They are rehearsing. A treaty implies trust. There is no trust left. He slammed his fist down. The radio cracked. From the speaker, one final phrase. "You've breached your pattern. You must return." Pepe had sealed the halal. Salt at the doors. Ili stones at the 4 corners. No chance. No footsteps. But today she heard drumming. Not human rhythm. Something that pulsed without time. She burst in. The girls were back. The students who had vanished. Their faces changed mid-turn, eye sockets inverted, feet landing backward. In the center, Nohea stood with eyes shut, spinning perfectly. Each spin shed a skin. Each skin folded itself. Each fold whispered, "You made us real. We are remembering how to forget." Pepe screamed a chant so old it hurt. The girls shrieked, not from pain, but from instability. The air cracked. The drumming stopped. The halau stood empty. No students. No noise. Just a single note pinned to the floor. "We need new agreements." Makani rang up 3 customers that morning. Each handed him something abstract. A jar labeled "Last Joy." A coin that felt wet but left no moisture. A laugh, spoken but never echoed. He didn't remember how long he'd worked there. The lights above him flickered in Morse, not electric. Then a girl came in. She said nothing. She placed a lei on the counter. And whispered, "Do you remember your real name?" He blinked. The store exploded in light. Not fire. Not energy. Awareness. When he opened his eyes, the lei was on his neck. The register was ash. And outside the door, no town. Just reef. Everywhere, the seams frayed. A man remembered playing piano, though he never learned. A woman looked at her newborn and saw 3 faces, rotating. A teen recited facts about a second ocean beneath the island, even as his mouth bled salt. The treaty, such as it was no longer holding. Because too many noticed. Too many patterns broke. Too many truths slipped past silence. Nalei sat by the fire, unmoving. She poured water into a cracked wooden bowl. It boiled without heat. She spoke one last truth aloud. They were never supposed to need our shape. But now they can't let it go. The folded witness. A sentient dimensional topology that doesn't observe but remembers possibilities. It holds unchosen choices, ghost versions of outcomes that exist in tension. When engaged by a primary consciousness, it offers decision, not power. Once a choice is made, it rewrites consequence backwards across the timeline. The forest didn't move the way forests should. Not wind. Not growth. But folds, like paper creasing without hands. Kailani knew this was where it had to end. The animals avoided this place. The birds never called here. Even the earth had gone still. This wasn't a location. It was a decision space. She passed the half-buried remnants of her journals, her childhood fort under the twisted how tree, and the spot where she first kissed Nico, now occupied by a black geometric recess that led nowhere, not even down. At the heart of the forest, where the land tilted without rising, it waited. Not an object. Not a being. But a mirror. Except not reflective in light. Reflective in potential. It pulsed faintly, like breath in reverse. And then it spoke. In her voice. I'm the prior you. The one who turned left when you turned right. The one who left when you stayed. We were both valid, but now there can only be one. The folded witness glimmered. It didn't move, but each angle of it changed meaning as she blinked. One moment it looked like a shimmer of wet glass, another like a dense fog folding back on itself, and then, her face, her eyes, her doubts. The voices of the others swelled inside it, overlapping. Makani's silence. Naliai's chant. Lupe's drawings. 1,000 versions of Kaho lived inside that thing. All looping. All diverging. None fully real. The folded witness leaned closer. Without ever shifting position. You can restore what was. Erase the changes. Seal the fracture. You'll forget, but the world will breathe a little slower. Or continue what has begun. Let them become. Let the veil fall completely. Let the town finish shifting. Kailani stepped forward. The space bent under her feet, not with gravity, but intent. Action surged in her limbs. Her teeth buzzed. Her skin burned with every memory that had ever been revised. She reached out. The mirror split like muscle, and swallowed her. The next morning, Kaho was calm. Tourists arrived for the first time in months. They bought fruit from unmanned stalls. They took selfies at Coco Crater. They commented on how peaceful everything was, like stepping into a dream of what Hawaii should be. Nobody noticed the double-length shadows at noon. Nobody noticed the dogs that refused to walk west, growling low and confused. Nobody noticed that the maps now printed Kaho with 2 overlapping town borders, both legally valid, both historically correct. At the general store, Makani, or someone who looked like him, smiled and bagged groceries no one recalled purchasing. At the halau, Pepe swept the floor that no longer echoed. The mirror in the girls' dressing room showed a second entrance that didn't exist. In Kailani's old classroom, the new teacher wrote her name in careful script. Ms. Mahalana. The children repeated it softly. Then again. Louder. As if reteaching the world what belonged. Out in the woods, nothing stirred. But the air was thick. Like a breath that hadn't finished exhaling. Final fragment, found on a torn journal page near the How tree. We were always a split thread. One half remembered. One half became. Asterisk. Lupe sits at the edge of the reef, toes dipped into still water. The tide hasn't moved in 2 days, but the crabs pretend it has. She doesn't draw anymore. Not since she ran out of stars. The new ones don't stay drawn. They smear even when the paper's dry. They argue with the pencil. That's okay. She remembers the constellations anyway. The ones she named. The ones that took. Sometimes she whispers them to herself. But only when no one's watching. If you name a thing twice, it comes back too sharp. The tourists think Kaho is beautiful now. Polished. Restored. Lupe thinks it looks like a copy of a photo someone cut too neatly. Everyone smiles here. Even when they're alone. Even when they sleep. She saw Makani yesterday. His hands were reversed. He didn't notice. Sometimes the town shudders like it's breathing in. The grown-ups say it's just wind. But Lupe knows better. She listens to where the air comes from, not where it goes. One night, when the moon looked slightly incorrect, she asked the sky its real name. Just once. Very softly. It answered. But not in words. It answered in unremembering. She forgot her baby brother's middle name. She forgot the color of her first bike. She forgot how her mother used to laugh before the town changed. But she remembers Kailani. The real one. She visits the How tree sometimes. Leaves white flowers in a circle, like a soft-spoken offering. Lupe never steps into the center. Not yet. Not until she's ready to answer if the folded witness ever asks her. Because it will. One day. She's already started dreaming of other versions of herself. Some taller. Some louder. One with no mouth, just a name tattooed across her throat. Lupe, choice delayed. Lupe hums to the sea. She doesn't name it. Not yet. She lets it sleep a little longer. the end, or just this beginning?